been doing sports since I was a young kid. I first started racing bikes when I was 13. I was on the UK junior program for a couple of years when I was 17, 18. And I realized that I wasn't going to be a world champion. Like I was okay, but I wasn't really, really good. So I started working. I was in real estate for 12 years, ended up having my own company, but I still loved sport. I still did a little bit of coaching on the side. I hated being a real estate agent. I really was unhappy. So I was at the European Championships in 2007, watching a kid that I'd coached compete at his first international championships in Germany. And I committed to myself like that day when I got back, I was going to sell my business. So I did. And then I opened my own professional cycling coaching business. I did that for 5 years in the UK. And then I've done that for the last 8 years since I've been here. And then in the last year, so the last part of that I was working for USA Cycling as the national team coach, track sprint coach. And then I decided to move into emotional coaching because I wanted to get a bigger audience and have more people to work with.
Super. And can you tell us more a little bit about what that means, emotional coaching?
Sure. Helping people find their best version of themselves, I think, is the most succinct way to put it. Focusing on all areas of your life, but predominantly on how you connect with others, how you communicate with others, how you connect with yourself. And a principle I call above and below the line, which is how you react to external stimuli. So a lot of people, something happens, you get a reaction and you react from the place of reaction. So you have an emotional response and you react from that place. And how I help people is I teach them that you get a choice. So you get an external stimulation and then you get to choose how you want to react to that. And you use that emotional response as a tool and as data, and you go, okay, what is this telling me? How do I want to respond to this? Instead of most people instinctively respond. And a lot of that can come from their kind of learned patterns, childhood trauma that might not be healthy as an adult. So we kind of teach people to let go of that kind of behavior and choose how they want to behave now in a more healthy way for them.
Okay. And I kind of started you on your presentation, but I thought that we go through Q&A, you and I, like we had planned to, and then we'll see if Nikita and Matt have some questions as well, if that works for you.
I'm looking forward to their very eloquent and testing questions. No pressure, guys.
So the first question, what does joy mean? How does being aware of your emotions helps us as people and athletes?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? What is joy? I think it's different to different people. I think the most important aspect of joy is, though, to think of emotions as periods in time. So if we think of sadness is often connected with the past. So it's with grief, it's with things we're struggling to let go of. There tends to be an element of past in sadness. Fear tends to be about the future, what's going to happen, what might happen, the stories I tell myself about the challenges that I might face. Anger and joy tend to be in the moment. So we tend to feel those things right there and then. And for us to really feel joy, we need to concentrate on being present. And that can be particularly difficult for us as athletes because we're goal orientated. So a lot of our thinking is, what's next? What do I need to be able to do to win this competition? What do I need to be able to do to hit this weight in the gym? What do I need to be able to do to be this good tactically in a bike race? And we're thinking forward and we don't spend enough time in the moment. So the people that I've worked with and from my own experience, the best way to find joy is to be present in the moment. How am I going to enjoy today as much as I can? How am I going to enjoy today's training session as much as I can, rather than this is just a stepping stone to the success that I want or to the result I want? Because that's when I see people get burnt out. If every training session is just about ticking the box to get to the next day, you don't actually be present in the training session, and you're not enjoying the environment. You're not enjoying the physical sensations that you're going through. You're not enjoying the camaraderie with the people that you're training with. I'm a really big advocate on find people to train with, find people to train with that make your environment good, not people that drag you down, and work really hard on that cohesiveness. Even if you're doing individual events, even if it's an individual sport, find people to train with that are going to push you and you can push each other.
It's really interesting because it's about stopping. It's about taking a break, which is really not comfortable for athletes, I think. You know, like you said, we are on
we want to move forwards.
on the wheel, moving forward and looking at the next step and what else can I do to be better? What else? How can I run faster? What else can I pack into my day to be more performant? But here you're just telling us to stop. It's really interesting, and it really goes against kind of natural instinct on performance, I think.
Yeah, you know, when we're so driven, it's always about go, go, go next. And then we miss everything. And your career is 10 years, it's not a long time. And then it's gone, and you're like, you know, one of the things I started doing when I was traveling with the national team is I'd tack a day on to the end of any travel to go and explore the city I was in. Because I realized I was traveling all over America and the world, but I wasn't actually seeing where I was, because we'd go to an indoor velodrome. I'd spend 14 hours a day in an indoor velodrome, and then I'd come back home and I had no idea where I'd even been. It didn't even matter where I'd been. It was just another indoor velodrome. So I started to, unfortunately, we got stopped by COVID, but I was going to take the kids after the Junior World Championships to explore Egypt for 2 days, because we were going to go, that was where the Junior World Championships were meant to be last year. And I think it's important to get some of that experience out of your journey as an athlete. I've got a couple of guys that I'm working with that are competing in Tokyo right now. And one of the things we've discussed is when they get to the velodrome, stopping, looking around the velodrome and just taking in that they're in Olympic Games. Because, you know, you get to the velodrome, right, get my stuff unpacked, get warmed up, get my training session done. And just a minute of standing there and going, I'm here. I deserve to be here. I've trained hard to be here, or I've worked hard as a coach to be here. And just absorbing that is a special moment in itself.
This is really interesting because I also think there is a space for doing your own personal little routine and staying in there. And you get, you know, for me, it was the pool. You get to the pool, you set up your stuff in a certain way that you're used to. It brings you comfort. You go through your routine like you do at home, and you're trying to block out the external factors because they're the one typically that would distract you. And yet you're saying there is a time for taking it all in and then refocusing and going back to your routine. Right?
Yeah, that's a really good distinction, Miriam. I'm not saying spend your entire time at the velodrome going, oh, I wonder what's going on, and being distracted. I'm saying take the moment in emotionally and then go into that kind of robotic routine of, and I really like routines and processes. You know, when I work with somebody, we set up those routines that you can take anywhere. So the warm-up's the same whether you're doing it here at the local track or you're doing it in Japan or you're doing it in Guatemala, wherever you're going, your warm-up is exactly the same. So as you say, you have that comfort, the emotional comfort, right? I know I will be ready. My preparation is the same. Your body knows what's coming and you're ready to perform. I think there's just this moment where you want to just allow yourself to experience where you are and what you're at, especially the big competitions. And that's probably going to come to something that we're going to talk about later as well, as like what we do after these competitions.
And you certainly could put these moments scheduled into your routine and work with your coach to have, you know, your 5 minute before, your 5 minute after your win or after your race, like this time where it's about you, it's about feeling it, it's allowing yourself to feel it, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think there's fear about becoming overwhelmed. And for me, if you allow yourself some space, you're much less likely to become overwhelmed. And instead of when you're like, right, I'm going to be very protective and I'm hanging on like this. There's a lot of energy in that. And if you allow yourself to feel something, process it, and then move on to the next part of what you have to do, then you're not holding like this to protect yourself. It's like, okay, I'm going to allow myself to feel the emotion of being at the Olympics. Take some deep breath. Right, I've allowed that. Now, what's my warm up? Let's get back into my normal routine.
This is really interesting because I think it could be very liberating to let go of that energy, allowing yourself to do that. Then you can use and fuel yourself with a little bit of that energy, but it's not completely gaining control over yourself.
Yeah. A friend of mine has a really good technique for dealing with high stress situations. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Go for it.
Okay. So he has what he calls his fuck it chair. So he has his like good chair and his fuck it chair. And how this works is he sits in what we'll call the bad chair from now on. He sits in that chair and he allows himself to feel anything. So he allows himself negative self-talk. Right, I'm not going to go very well today. My legs feel rubbish. I'm going to be rubbish. I'm going to mess the start up. It's all going to go wrong. And he allows himself the space to feel that, process that emotion. And there's no self-judgment when he's doing it. He's not sitting there going, I'm going to ruin my day and I'm getting so stressed. He allows himself to feel these emotions. Starts his warm-up, and then before each warm-up, he sits in his positive chair and he goes, okay, today's going to be a good day. I can let that go. I've exercised the negative emotion. Today's going to be a good day. And then if he starts to feel negative emotion coming on, back into the negative chair, it's okay. I can exercise it there. And this allows him to exercise that. Often we look at it and we're like, you must be positive. You must be in a great emotional state. You must sit here or everything's going to go wrong. And that's not how humans are designed to work. We're designed to process emotions. So we should feel fear. We should feel anger, process it rather than trying to pretend it's not happening. And that's one of the biggest issues with our society, especially for men. We teach men not to process emotions, and we end up with a lot of angry men because they have no idea how to process their emotions. Women tend to be more encouraged societally. We don't take that to sports, unfortunately. So there's a stigma like, oh, she's too emotional to be a good sports person. And actually, no, I want her to be emotional. I want somebody to be experiencing their emotions, because that actually allows you to be able to turn on the warrior when you need to, if you're able to clearly process your emotions.
I love this example that you picked, because I do this with work and I've done it for years, where you have the crap folder and everything that is annoying you about your work day or that you can't deal with, you put in the crap folder. You allow yourself to like deal with it for a little bit, and then when you close the folder, it's closed and you move on to something else, and sometimes you go back to it. It's a really good image.
We as athletes and coaches have a fear about processing emotions. So if I can use another example from an athlete I was coaching, I was at the velodrome. My athletes are warming up. It was their sprint day. So the warm up involves doing one really fast effort on the track. I'm watching the boys do that, and at the corner of my eye, I see one of the girls in the pit looking like she's in distress. And one of our other coaches, our endurance coach, is with her and talking to her, and he looks really uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I walk back into the pit and she's crying, and he's trying to comfort her. And he's like, it's going to be okay. And I say to him, hey, let me take over. I sit next to her and I say, what's going on? And she's like, well, I'm just really overcome with emotion. She'd had some family health issues, and she was just overcome with emotion, getting ready to race. So I said to her, this is good. Cry as much as you want to cry. In fact, I want to hear you cry loud. I want to just go for it. Cry as much as you want. And she kind of looked at me in confusion, like nobody's ever given me permission to cry before. She started to cry. She cried for maybe 30 seconds, and then she burst into laughter, because she'd not actually allowed herself to fully feel emotion and then go through it to the other side. She'd been taught, you got to squish it down. Don't show your emotion. And just given her permission to feel in that moment, she processed that emotion in like 30 to 60 seconds, came out the other side, started laughing, got up and qualified 5 fastest in the competition 10 minutes later. So this is where I think as coaches, we have this opportunity to encourage our athletes to be able to go through those emotions in a healthy way, rather than, you've got to race in 10 minutes. Shut that down. You can't be crying now. And that's the kind of stuff I hear from coaches. Like, you can't be stressed now. Don't do this now. Instead of, it's okay. Feel your emotions. And then people will progress through those, usually pretty rapidly.
And it connects to what you said at the beginning, is if you do things in the moment, a present moment now, it actually lasts much shorter. It's much shorter than if you repress them. So part of being in the moment, in the present moment, is dealing with it now, and it's only going to last 15, 30 seconds. We talk a lot about this in meditation. If you know, seeing the train go by or the clouds, it's the same image and it's just passing, and you got to let it pass through you and then come out the other side. I think it's a really good image.
That's how our psyche is designed to work. And unfortunately, especially in Western society, we don't support that as much as I would like to see. If you look at young children, little boys and girls, they'll react very similar. There's no difference between boys and girls and how they react. Their fear, their sadness, their joy, they react the same. And you look at how quickly a child changes its emotions. You know, they'll have a temper tantrum, then bang, they're suddenly happy and running around. And that's what we should be able to do as adults as well. Now, we don't necessarily need to go as extreme. I'm not saying we need to lie on the floor and scream and, you know, shake our fists, but we should be able to feel anger and actually feel it, not just kind of know there's something there that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you're going against a lot of things we've been taught a certain way, either by our coaches or by society, on what's acceptable or not acceptable. So I find that fascinating. You can you tell us a little bit about the inner versus outer scorecard concept?
Yeah, I got this from a guy called Ryan Holiday, who wrote a book, The Obstacle is the Way, and he runs a website called The Daily Stoic, and he teaches a lot of Stoic philosophy. So we tend to, when we're appreciating ourselves or when we're looking for our value in life, we tend to either be able to give that to ourselves and recognize our own accomplishments, or we tend to look outside for that. And in my experience, a lot of athletes, especially, and coaches, look outside for that. So I was working with the coach the other day, and I said, you know, how do you find your validation in life? And she said, when my team win. I'm like, okay, you know, like at what level? And she's like, well, when it's the national championships. I said, how many national championships do you do a year? She said, 1. I said, so you get validation on your ability as a coach once a year? And she's like, oh, wow, yeah. So how are we validating ourselves, and how are we able to either look inside and go, right, here's what I want to achieve today. Did I achieve that today in today's session? Yes, great. Give myself a tick mark. Today was a good day. If I didn't, not I'm rubbish, I'm a piece of crap, why did I not achieve that? It's, okay, what do I need to do differently to achieve it tomorrow? And it's a dispassionate, objective look at it. When we're looking for external validation, number one, most people are terrible at offering appreciation and validation. We just are. We're not taught to do it. It's something we're poor at. We all want it. I desperately want validation from other people. It's been an issue for me my whole life. It's like, I want people to tell me that I'm good at what I do. So I will show off sometimes to get that. Has the opposite effect, doesn't give me what I want. So now I've moved to this inner scorecard of, did I do what I wanted to do? Did I do it as well as I wanted it to do? I did, great. Give myself the validation. Well done, me. And I don't do it on results. I do it on process. So some of my best races are races I've lost, where I've been racing against somebody better than me, and I did the race as well as I could have done, physically, tactically, emotionally. They beat me because they were better than me. I feel a lot of success around that and a lot of validation around that. I've won races, performed badly, but won because I was the better athlete, and been really upset with myself because that to me isn't success. The success is process and executing really well. And that's where that inner scorecard can be really useful, is you focus on the process, not on the result. So you can give yourself validation, you can give yourself appreciation for getting the process really well done. And if somebody beats you, and they deserve to beat you because they're a better athlete than you, that doesn't take away from your own happiness and your own enjoyment in the situation. Whereas a lot of athletes look at it and go, either I won or I lost. You know, the Talladega Nights, what is it? Ricky Bobby, what's the saying from that? Second is the first loser. I can't remember. Second is nowhere, or something like that, or only first counts, whatever it is. And there is a mentality like that in sport, that if you didn't win, you're an abject failure. And if we're only judging our life on the times that we've won, well, we don't win very much. Even the most successful athletes in the world don't win all the time. So we're basically saying everybody that does a sport is going to be unhappy for the majority of the time, because their happiness comes from only winning. And I think we need to find different ways to be able to appreciate ourselves, rather than just, did I win?
Again, a super interesting concept, because in business, often you ask, how do you measure success for your company or for your organization? Why can't we transfer this to athlete and be the one defining our own measure of success? So like for Matt or Nikki, you know, how do you define your own measure of success? Of course, winning will be one at some point, but on the day-to-day, how do you define what today's success is? I think that's really interesting also, because we tend to go to practice on autopilot often, without thinking about that next practice, without thinking, okay, maybe there is one thing today that I'm trying to achieve. And then at the end of this practice, did I or not achieve that? I think it's a really important concept. And it's a good segue with the next question, which is between perfection, being, you know, good and perfection, or being good enough and perfection. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's this ethos of, we strive for greatness, we strive for perfection, while realizing we may never get perfection. Like, it doesn't really exist. So when do we know something's good enough? And often I'll see athletes focusing on something and spending a lot of time focusing on one thing that's already good enough. Like, they're good enough at it to be useful to their sport, and yet they keep trying to perfect it, and then they miss other game areas because they're so hooked up on, like, I must make this perfect. Or the other one, what we see as athletes and coaches, is we just become incredibly harsh on ourselves because we can't get this one thing perfect. And yet again, is it good enough for us to be able to do what we need to do? It is great. You know, you think of, let's take a complicated skill sport like golf. There's some people that look like they almost have a perfect swing in golf. Like, it just looks so beautiful. There's other professional golfers that are just as good as them, but have these little idiosyncrasies in their swing. Now, they could spend their entire time trying to get rid of the idiosyncrasy, but if it's not actually holding them back, if it doesn't actually affect how the club face meets the ball at the moment of impact, it doesn't matter. And yet you can go down that rabbit hole of spending years trying to undo something that isn't actually going to impact your performance. So I think we have to be very careful, like, is this going to impact my performance or not? If it's not, then it's good enough. Where are my other gain areas that I can go on? And there's emotional safety in this as well, because it can, you know, if you're trying to beat yourself up, to be absolutely perfect in everything, you're not going to do it. You're going to have some bad night's sleep. You're going to make a poor choice in food occasionally. There's a professional cyclist who's a friend of mine, and he would call them emotional health weekends. And he would go out and he'd eat rubbish food and he'd have a couple of drinks, just to allow that kind of pressure of, I must be perfect, off of himself occasionally. And we look at these great athletes and we think they're perfect the whole time. And in my experience, what they do is they do the day-to-day very well, and then they know when they need to have that release. They know when they need to let go a little bit.
Can we shift a little bit into the athlete-coach relationship? I think
Sure.
there's still a lot of coaches who, and I'm talking at the top level, right, at the elite level, who using fear-based motivational techniques, are pretty aggressive with the athlete, are totally on the side of like repressing emotions and not letting you show that. What would be a response or a way for an athlete to find joy in that type of an environment?
Yeah, that's tough. I kind of want to answer that from the other way. What do we need to do to help these coaches be better? I think it's both. So first off, this is something I'm super passionate about. We need to be able to meet these coaches. So if you look at what's going on for these coaches, they're in a fear position themselves. They're afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of not looking good. They're afraid of being a failure. They're put in that fear. So they're, the emotional term would be they're projecting that fear onto their athletes, and they're leading from fear. They're not leading from vulnerability and strength. So if we can encourage them to be, hey, I'm afraid that we're not going to win. How are we going to do this together? Not, if you don't do this, the world is ending, because then they're coming from their own fear. So we have to support and meet the coaches first and give them some space to be able to vent the fear. So I'm actually going to create a peer group for coaches to be able to come and share that stuff, because I think that's vital. And we've got to move on from, as you say, that kind of old school of a coach should be tough and shouting at athletes on the sidelines. That's not good coaching. That is really not. And every study into psychology shows that fear-based does not work as well as support-based. Just doesn't. And we see that more and more in business now. And you see the new companies starting that come from a much more vulnerable place of leadership. You've got the likes of Brené Brown and Simon Sinek leading that charge so that companies understand this. We seem to be a little bit behind in the sports world at the moment. We haven't kind of realized that threatening athletes is not the way to get the best performance from them. When you're in that as an athlete, firstly, recognize it. It's not about me. I'm not a failure because my coach is telling me I'm a failure. I'm not a failure because my coach is angry with me. That's their stuff. So be able to separate their emotional position from yours, and then start communicating with the coach and say, hey, I'm the kind of athlete that does better with praise than I do with fear or negativity. The more praise you give me, the more you look for what I'm doing well, the better I'll perform. So knowing that about yourself, knowing that that's what you need to succeed, you can start communicating that with the coach. And you might not get it, but at least you're actively doing something about it, rather than just sitting there going and being in fear the whole time and being afraid of making mistakes. It's one of the things you see about really good sports teams and really poor sports teams. Poor sports teams, people are afraid of making a mistake, so can't express themselves. Great sports teams, everybody is empowered to be able to do what they're best at, and mistakes are part of the game. You look at the Golden State Warriors, are a great example of that. Stephen Curry, the most efficient basketball player who's ever played the game, also takes the craziest shots that any basketball player has ever taken in the history of the game. He's taking 3-pointers from the halfway mark, and that's a good shot for Stephen Curry. Now, if his coach was like most coaches, they'd say, do not take that shot. That's a poor percentage shot. Don't take the shot. And they would coach the magic out of Steph Curry. His coach is brave enough to go, no, this guy is able to do that. I'm going to support him. Even if I look stupid as a coach, even if he messes up, I'm going to support him. And that's how you get one of the best players in the world. It is tough. I'm not going to lie. It's tough as an athlete being on the receiving end of that. And if you have a chance, if you have the choice, pick a different coach. Often people pick coaches when we have the choice as to what coach we work with. They pick coaches based on what that coach did themselves as an athlete, or one or two athletes that coach has coached that did really well. And that might be they got lucky and found really talented people, or they were very talented themselves. It might not be that they're actually a great coach. Look for a coach that makes you feel good, that supports you, that works on the process, that isn't attacking attached to the result. So go back to what we were talking about before. We should never be attached to the result as an athlete or a coach. We should be attached to the process, and the process will take care of the result. If you're attached to the result, you're less likely to perform as well, because it's all about whether you win or lose. Whereas if you execute your process really well and you're a great athlete, you're going to win. The winning takes care of itself. It's the process that allows you to win.
And I also like, in this description, you also give a great tip that I never thought about. It's so obvious, you know, that the coach who uses fear-based techniques or coaching techniques is manifesting their own fears. Just saying this allows the athlete to be, hang on a second, I'm good enough. It's not about me. It's the other person. And you taking it outside of yourself and you bring it back to the person who is projecting it. It's not about yourself. It's about the coach and their own fears. I think that's the first step, to like separate yourself and not take this as your personal judgment. And then
you very eloquently describe the entire world, Miriam.
Yeah.
Everybody else's behavior is about them. It's not about you. And being able to separate those two things is vital in life. Like if somebody's behaving poorly to you, it's really probably about them and not you. And if you can have your shield and go, I'm good enough. I love that statement. I'm good enough. I'm just going to have a shield, and that shit can bounce back to you. That's your stuff. And that's not easy. That is the way to truly find joy in the world, is to have that shield and know that other people's poor behavior is about them and not about you.
And it's really difficult, like you said, like if you hear this and you're on the receiver end every day, the in and out, it's really difficult to shield yourself from it. But really understanding that it's the coach's issues and not yours, and understanding that they probably have been coached themselves this way for so many years that they can't even separate from it. And they have the fear of changing, plus the fear of losing their job, not having result, etc. So it's a lot of things packed up in one situation.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to remember, is most people fear change. Mm-hmm. Again, the best coaches I've worked with embrace change. They're looking for change. They're looking for, how can I do this better? They invite criticism. They invite feedback. They're like, how can we do this better? Their training philosophy isn't stuck on an idea. The philosophy is, I'm doing the best I can today. If something better comes along, brilliant, can't wait to try it. That's not where a lot of coaches sit. A lot of coaches sit in the, I know this works, or I think this works. I mean, they feel that it works, but we can show that there's better ways of doing it. But they're comfortable in that, and they don't want change. And the other important thing to recognize is there's a power dynamic. You know, the coach usually holds a position of power over the athlete. They might be in charge of selection for the team. They might be in charge of selection for individual events. There's certainly a dynamic there. And I worked hard as a coach to minimize that dynamic. Yes, I'm the coach. There's a responsibility. I'm responsible for the athletes. There's a position here where I hold the space. I'm in charge of discipline. If we don't turn up in time, there's going to be, there's going to be some kind of recompense for that. I hold that space, but that doesn't mean I need to lead with total authority. I get to empower everybody to be their own leader, to have their own voice, and to be an active part in their training. And again, this is where I see the difference between good coaches and bad coaches. When an athlete comes to a coach and says, why do we do this? Or could we do this a little differently? Or I read about this, what do you think? The coach, a good coach, is going to go, that's great. I love that you're taking interest in this. I love that you're studying this. And this is where you're right. And yeah, we'll take this on. Or yeah, I see where you're thinking that, but this is the physiological process that you've missed. So let me explain this to you more, and gets the athlete to buy into what they're doing. The bad coach is, just do it the way I've told you to do it. That doesn't empower an athlete to be the best versions of themselves. The more we understand something as athletes, the more likely we are to buy into it, the more we'll believe it, the more we'll get that placebo effect of, I really believe this, and I'm just going to train 5% harder because I absolutely believe this, as opposed to this is what the coach is telling me to do.
Yeah, and so perfect way to switch. We've talked a lot about the emotions, the coaches. Can we look a little bit at models? What techniques you have used to help with stress management and also staying in the moment, finding joy? Can you talk about the different models that you use?
Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier. There's a really good one called above and below the line. So the point of this is the line is kind of where we want to be in our behavior and our responses. So below the line is I'm not behaving like I'd like to right now. So I'm coming from a place of defensiveness. I'm coming from a place of kind of fear. I'm coming from a place of I'm a victim. The world is doing this to me. And we want to move above the line. So above the line is taking control. And I can send this sheet to you so you can send this out to people with this so they can see it. It's taking control. It's going, okay, I'm in charge of how I react. I'm often when things happen to us, we think we're out of control. We always have some way of reacting to it. So there's a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've ever come across that. One of the best books I've ever read. Psychologist in a concentration camp in Germany, and he observes how people respond to this awful situation they're in. And he realized the people that survived had choice about how they reacted. So everybody's treated the same way. Everybody's getting a terrible situation. Some people were able to react to that in a positive way and just find something about the day that they could enjoy or some connection they could share with somebody, whereas others were like, I'm a victim, the world is horrible to me, and they're constantly in that position of everything is happening to them. So knowing that we get to respond below the line, our initial response is going to be fear, anger, sadness, and then getting to choose how we respond after that and go, right, now this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to take control. This is how I'm going to share how I'm feeling. This is how I'm going to ask for what I need in this moment. That can be really powerful because it gets people to reframe where they're at. So instead of sitting in the victimhood, I've lost, the world is all over, they sit there and they go, great, what did I learn from this experience? It's a great learning experience from me. Losing is teaching me something. What can I get from that? And that's taking control again. So I really like that as a model for how we can look at the world and then change the way that we respond to things.
I want to open it a little bit to Nikki and Matt, see if you guys have questions, because, you know, Lee and I have been talking a fair bit, and he's reinforced everything I think about coaching, and we're on the same page. I want to see if you guys have specific questions that maybe relate to your experience, feedback or comment. Nikki?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Lee. It was very informative, and actually some of the questions I was writing down, you ended up answering anyways, but one was how to find, if I do have the opportunity to find my own coach, what qualities should I be looking for? And I say this because personally, I have had a lot of fear-based training, and I've almost become addicted to it as an athlete. So when I come across a coach who is very nice and supportive, I almost distrust him or feel like I'm being coddled or he's too soft. It's almost hard to feel like I'm being pushed to my max level because he's being so nice. And I'm like addicted to that suffering and that. So if I don't have that voice from the coach, I actually become that voice to myself. And I start to become more self-critical and very judgmental of my performance because I'm not receiving it from the coach. I'm like, okay, someone has to be tough on me. So how do you, if you've grown up with that mentality, how do you kind of process it or kind of let it go and say it's okay for everything to just be, you know, supportive and positive, and you don't need that voice like breaking you down, saying you didn't do well or that was a bad shot or whatever? Like, how do you change that that dynamic or that voice in your head that needs to be, you know, countering the positivity always?
Yeah, I love that question, Nikki. What sport do you do?
I'm a professional tennis player. So
Okay.
I play both singles and doubles, but yeah, individual sport.
Lovely. Okay, cool. Thank you. Great question. So the social conditioning is, I must have somebody telling me that I'm not good enough to be able to push myself hard enough. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yeah. And then is this a fear that you're then going to get self-critical, or is this something that you've experienced?
I think when I was younger, I definitely experienced that if I did make a mistake, it was like immediately someone would jump on me and say, ah. So now if I do make a mistake and someone doesn't say anything to me, or if they're like, it's okay, I'm like, no, it wasn't okay. Or I'll be like, how did you miss that? Like in my head or out loud. And I'm like starting to realize it's okay to make these mistakes. And I don't need to have so much anxiety over every shot that I hit. But I'm so used to having this voice hovering over me saying, you made a mistake, or you need to, things that I know how to do and correct. It's like somebody's always just there telling me that.
Yeah.
It just displays itself through my own like self-criticism and judgment out loud,
Yeah.
verbally on the court or in a match.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. So the first thing I want to make a distinction. I'm not saying every coach has to be positive the whole time. I'm not a positive coach the whole time. If you do something wrong, I'm going to say, hey, that's not how we want to do that. And then I'm going to ask you how we could have done that differently. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to empower you to analyze your own performance. And I'm not going to shame you. So from what you're saying, there's been some shame in there. That was not good enough. That was a bad shot. And what a lot of us do is we internalize that. And when we hear that was a bad shot, we hear I'm a bad person. So I want to make the distinction between you as a human being and you as somebody playing your sport in the moment. And yeah, I'm a challenging coach. You're not going to get, it's not going to be easy, and everything isn't going to be roses and it's like, oh, we're just going to have fun today. Like, I'm going to push you very hard. The difference is we're looking at this analytically. It's not from my emotional place of fear. I'm like, you have to be better or I'm a bad coach, or you have to be better or you're a bad athlete. It's coming from this place of, how do we strive to be a little bit better every day? And I really liked what Miriam said earlier about having an intention from the training session, right? What is it I want to get from this individual training session? And we should have that for every training session, either a technical aspect, a physical aspect, an emotional aspect, something we get from it. So for you, I like the fact that you have a strong internal voice. I would want to work one-to-one with you to reframe that voice from being, that was not good enough, to what can I learn from that? And see everything. Here's where the positive part of it, every mistake is an opportunity. Okay, I've learned I'm not hitting my forehand as well as I want to. What do I need to do to get my forehand where I want it to be? Instead of, I just hit a bunch of really bad shots today. Why are you playing so badly today? Which could be your internal voice, or could be the voice from the coach. Hey, Nikki, why are you so rubbish today? You can't hit anything. I've heard people say that. That doesn't actually do anything for you. That's not helping you be a better athlete. What I would want to see is, hey, Nikki, I see you're struggling a bit with your forehand today. What do you think is going on? And then we would talk about it together, and then we'd say, right, what do we think we need to do to work on this? And then we'd work on it. So I'm not saying, I want to be very clear on this, that coaches don't ever give critical feedback. There's going to be a lot of critical feedback, but the emotion and the voice and the intent behind it, is it there to shame the athlete, or is it there to help you become a better athlete? Are you a partner in it? So is the coach saying to you, what do you think you need to do? Or are they just saying you're not doing this well enough? I can't improve by somebody telling me I'm doing something poorly. That doesn't actually offer me anything. I can only improve by you offering something to me. And ideally, I want you to check in with me first to see how much I understand what's going on. And then the coach should be the person that goes, right, here's what I think you're missing, and here's what I think you've got right. And let's get these things together and let's get these things sorted. That doesn't mean the coach can't be tough. I can hold a space where you're going to train so hard, you're going to fall over at the end of the training session. And I don't need to give you a hug at the end of the training session. I might give you a high five. but I can also do that in a way that is loving and supportive because we're working towards a joint goal rather than I'm doing it, Miriam said, from fear of, right, you have to do this to prove something to me. So one of the issues I had with my national team program is I had people outside the program saying, you're not tough enough on the athletes. They're not throwing up. You've got to make them tougher. And these people didn't understand that the athletes I worked with were incredibly driven. It's not my job to push somebody who's already incredibly driven to be more driven. I want to encourage that and support it. And often I want to say, whoa, we need a rest day here. Or, you know, this session's done. You're not performing well today. And they'll be like, no, but I want to finish this session because you've labeled 4 efforts and I've only done 3. The session's done. That's my job as a coach, is to know when to push, when to back off. And in my judgment, when you're working with elite athletes, 99% of them are more driven than they almost need to be. And it's just, let's just dial that down a little bit to get you into the right place. Did that answer your question, Nikki, or is there some other questions you have there?
No, absolutely. That balance makes sense for sure. And I do often find myself asking coaches when they do make a critique like that, okay, then what should I do? Or what can I do? Or I'll shadow swing the correct mistake. But it can definitely be done without the negativity or like, like you suck, and then correct it. Can just be like, okay, what's the fix? But back to, I just wanted to make one comment about the day-to-day thing. I think this is something that I discovered through my training last year because it started to get very repetitive with COVID, and I wasn't able to play matches to have that validation of, okay, like I won this match, yay. So I did need to find that in my day-to-day. And one thing that really helped me push through every day and kept me motivated was literally just improving every day. So like Miriam said, having specific goals and just fitness goals, tennis goals, and just doing a little check like, okay, I noticed improvement in this today or in that today, or I met this goal today. And that really keeps me going, I think, when I can't play, just improving in any area. So I always say, like, when people say, like, how do you keep going and pushing through your sport? It's just the daily improvements. That really keeps me motivated and the passion burning.
Can I reframe that slightly for you?
Sure.
Can we call them daily wins instead of daily improvements? Because if it's improvements, I'm not saying that's wrong, but if it's improvements, we're looking that we must be a little bit better at something, and that is usually physical. If we call them daily wins, we can find other things like, did I get my nutrition bang on today? Did I prepare all of my kit before training? So I got up, my bag was all ready, I just took my bag with me. So we're looking for those daily wins in all areas. And again, as athletes, our wins are, did I produce slightly more power? And in different training phases, you might not, so coaching track sprint cyclists, if you're in a really heavy gym phase, you're going to go slower on the bike. So if they're looking to go faster on the bike, that's not going to happen. But they could look at the session and go, did I manage to hold my aero position one tiny bit better today than I did yesterday? Right, that's something I can give myself a win for. So be aware it's not just pure physicality. We're looking for technique, we're looking for attitude. It can be, did I really enjoy my training session today? That's a win. Did I walk out of this session today feeling like I've given it everything, smile on my face, good communication with my coach and my fellow athletes? That's a win. And, as we're talking, I think a good thing for athletes to do would be to have some kind of sports gratitude journal where at the end of the day, you note your wins down. How many wins did I have today? And it could be, I was playing tennis outside and the temperature was perfect. It was 80 degrees, there was no wind, and I just felt great just being there, and the weather was great. So look for the wins outside of just purely the physicality, although I completely appreciate that is what we're looking for. We're looking to be, what's the Olympic motto? Stronger, faster, higher. We're looking to be a little bit better every day.
Yeah, you're right, because
Nikki, sorry. I also think there are wins you can find in the negatives, and those are really important.
Yes.
You show up with, and it's a really shitty day, you don't feel good. And these are going to be your most appreciable wins. If you can sustain your performance on a shitty day, or if you either something you did great and you didn't feel good at the beginning of practice, or you were able to turn it around, those are really interesting wins too. So I think like also finding those wins in the negative days and the negative moment when the conditions are not perfect, those are really important too.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love that.
It should be as such that there is some win in the form or the other every single day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is there's like almost like a chemical change in us. When we start looking for wins and gratitude and appreciation, we feel better. And I'm not sure if it's because we notice how many wins we have in our life, as opposed to we tend not to notice those, especially as athletes and driven humans, or whether we start creating more because we're looking for them. And I don't think it's the chicken. I don't think it matters. It's the fact that we overall are acknowledging our wins, we're just going to feel happier. And there's lots of data around that. People that have gratitude journals are happier. People that make good connections with other people are happier.
And Nikki, I have a comment back to the coach that I think when you are able to go out and choose your own coach, really important to listen to the way they speak. If someone is able to clearly articulate and identify technical feedback or feedback related to performance specifically, that's a good coach for me. Someone who separates and is not going to make personal judgment like you suck, you're really not doing anything good today, you're too slow, you're too something. Those are personal judgment related to the person. You want something related to, and it really depends on each sport, but it's got to be to the performance. I hear this a lot in synchronized swimming, where you're too low, you're too slow, you're not sharp enough. Those mean nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, because they don't give you the answer on how to get better. They don't like make you think on how you can improve your performance. So when you're like looking at different coaches, is really listen to what they say to try to evaluate if this is going to be a good fit for you.
I have one more comment on that, if I may ask the both of you.
Sorry, Nikki,
yes.
Just before you do that, I just want to really highlight what Miriam said there so we don't lose it for anybody watching this later. Incredible bit of gold that Miriam just gave you there and gave the audience there of how people speak to you really speaks about them and their understanding of people and sport. And when we're talking to people, we want to talk about their behaviors and their actions and not them as a person. And I think that was really, so I don't mean to, I just thought it was such a good observation there by Miriam, that you want a coach that's talking about exactly what you're doing and what you're going to work on, not you as the person. And we see that a lot in disagreements and arguments between couples. You can either say, when you did this behavior, this is how I felt, or you're a crappy person because you did this thing. The first one is likely to have a discussion where you can both talk about what's going on. The second one is just going to create anger and resentment. And that's obviously not what you want as a human being or you want as an athlete, is you want that critical feedback. You don't want somebody telling you you are rubbish. So I thought that was a really good distinction there from Miriam. And one more thing to add to it, I look for coaches that are curious and don't think they know it all. If they're curious about you, they're curious about the sport. If you ask them a question and they don't have the answer to it, they say, that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that. Let me research it. Or why don't you go and research it and come back to me and let's learn this together. A coach that always has to have the answer is going to be limited because they're going to make stuff up in the moment to prove that they have an answer and it's not going to be the right answer.
Okay.
Sorry, Nikki, go on.
No, actually, I think that answered my question for sure. I was just wondering if, for example, I overthink a lot on the court. Would I seek a coach out that balances that out, who's very like sharp and short, who doesn't let me go down that path, or someone who listens and will engage in that? Because I've had coaches who are just like, just stop talking and do it. right? But then I have a lot of questions, or I start like going in my brain later at night trying to figure it out myself. But then at the same time, that's good for me to have a coach who's very blunt and sharp, because they know that's it's kind of stopping me from being better, the overthinking and the analyzing. So that was just the question that I had, but I think you're saying someone who listen but knows.
I would deal with that differently in different situations, Nikki. Mm-hmm. So if you're in the middle of a game, we're not going to get into some massive technical discussion. I'm going to go with your instincts. Let go of overthinking, go with your instincts, play with your instincts, and you will be a better player. Now, if we're breaking something down after a competition or leading up to a competition, then we can get really technical. When you're in it, so do you understand the stages of learning?
The what of learning?
The stages of learning.
Maybe, but
okay.
I want to hear your explanation.
Yeah, so let me just do a quick overview of the stages of learning. So when we learn something new, we start unconsciously incompetent. We don't know how to do the skill and we can't do it. The next stage is consciously incompetent. We have an understanding now of what we're trying to do. We can't yet do it, haven't practiced enough. Then we get to consciously competent. We know how to do it. We're able to think about it. We're doing the skill. Then we get to unconsciously competent. This is where you want to sit in a tennis game. You're not thinking about what you're doing, you're reacting. And then we get to mastery. That's John McEnroe thinking that the tennis ball looked like a soccer ball when he was playing because it was so easy, everything seemed so slow, okay? That's where those two top ones are where you want to be when you're playing in a match. If you start to have a technical query or thought in the middle of playing, you can actually knock yourself right back to consciously incompetent. Mm-hmm. And you're now trying to figure out and think in the moment, what do I need to be doing? And your speed of action and reaction is going to slow down massively because you are cognitively trying to think about what you're doing instead of just doing. So this is why we should always work on skills some way away from important matches. And the closer we get to things that are important, the more automatic we want our actions to be, the less we want to think about it. And I'm not saying that as a highly skilled athlete, you can't change things technically in a game, because you can. You just want to be very careful about how much of that you do, because if you take yourself back into your cognitive thinking rather than your unconscious thinking, your reactions slow down hugely. And you don't want that. You're better off staying in your unconscious, just autonomously doing it mode, than you are trying to get into this cognitive, right? What am I actually trying to do here mode?
Awesome.
Did that answer that?
Yes.
And Matt, we've heard a lot from Nikki. Is there anything that you want to ask?
Yeah, I just had a kind of a comment. When you were talking about the daily wins, it kind of hit close to home because like I've been through a lot of injuries as an athlete competing, and daily wins has been something that I've really grown on and something that I've really incorporated kind of in my routine, because obviously when you're injured and you can't compete, you start to appreciate the small things you do throughout the day. And I've learned to, maybe not have goals or something that maybe even relate to sport throughout my day. And like before, when I wasn't injured, it was all about like kind of how you talked about focusing on the future and everything like that. And, what I was going to do a few months from now in a certain race or something. And then now that I've gone through these injuries, I've really learned to kind of do what you just talked about, the daily wins. I think it's something that's often overlooked when an athlete's going through something, whether they're healthy or not. And I think it's important that I've found, at least, to have goals that may not even relate to the sport itself, whether it's, how can I get better today, whether it's like maybe sleeping 8 hours or keeping up with your nutrition, like you mentioned, or something like that. I think that's something that's really, really helped me. And I think whether you're injured or not, like athletes, coaches, like whoever can apply it to their life. And I think that's something that is like just such a really good thing to do. And that I really agree with you on.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt. And sorry to hear you've had injury troubles. I've had 2 shoulder operations and a bad ankle sprain this year. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I'm not a good patient. In fact, I'm a terrible patient. What sport do you do, Matt?
I run cross country and track.
Okay. What were the injuries?
Oh man. I've had pretty much all bone injuries, like stress fractures,
Okay.
stuff, in feet and tibia. So nothing fun.
Have you considered doing a different sport?
Well, I only have 1 year left.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just I'm doing a lot of work on like the bike and swimming right now, cross training wise. And I find a lot of joy in that. Like I think it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I don't have any plans to like go professional or anything. So kind of like after this year, I'll probably not look to continue running so I don't get injured again.
I know a lot of good runners make excellent cyclists. Very low impact sport.
Yeah,
So
my buddy
hard to get injured.
Yeah, my buddy, he just actually turned pro for triathlons, who's on my team, and he absolutely loves it.
Triathlons, not so much. There's a lot of impact in triathlons.
Yeah.
But just offer, and there's a little bit of jest here. I do think it's a good opportunity, though. Again, one of the things that we tend to find with successful athletes is we're incredibly gritty. Like that is a quality that you need as an athlete, to get up, as you've just said here, to get up, to find the joy in the day when your body is not working properly, takes perseverance. Qualities that you can take into the world, whether that be in sport or in a job that is really going to stand you in good stead. So it's a great learning experience for you. One of the negatives of being incredibly gritty is we can sometimes not evaluate a situation very well. So we can look at it and we can go, I'm just going to keep doing this because I'm tough. And it might not be beneficial to us. So it's an opportunity to think, hey, I like doing sport. This might not be the right sport for my body. What could I be doing instead? And I would see this a lot in cycling. Cycling is predominantly an endurance sport. And I was a sprint coach. And gifted sprint athletes would be pushed to do endurance side of the sport because the coaches didn't know how to deal with a sprint athlete. So they'd be like, oh, you can win races at the end of a long road race with a sprint. And then you're looking at this athlete that's 200 pounds, like they're never going to get up a hill. This isn't going to happen. So be aware. And again, this is for the whole audience. There's many different sports and there might be one that suits you better. So you not quite getting what you want out of running doesn't mean that your sport in life should end. Try some different sports and see how your body responds to them.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I plan to probably play soccer again. Like once I'm out of college, just kind of explore different stuff outside of running. Cause I mean, I enjoy sport like as a whole, whatever it is. So yeah.
And Matt, I love what you said because you're ultimately you're talking about the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
These little wins and finding you said yourself every day I want to be a little bit better or improve something. And this is what you're going to continue to have as you go into different sport or different chapters of your life. This is what you're transferring, is that mindset of every single day I want to be a little bit better, or I want to learn this, or I'm curious from something new. And I love that you actually found that through the process of your injuries, because something that you may have thought just as a negative all around, right? All your injuries was like, for an athlete, could be breaking everything. It could be breaking your whole career. It could be like just destroying, you could see it as destroying everything. but if you look at it from a different perspective, there's so much learning from it. And ultimately it's learning that you have for life, not just for these vehicles this sport vehicle that you're using right now.
Because I've definitely seen like athletes go through injury, and maybe they're in like a boot for 6 weeks, and they don't do anything. They're just like, I'll get out of the boot in 6 weeks, and I'll start taking care of it. And like what I found when I was in, I guess, a cast last year for 6 weeks. And I sat down, I was like, all right, what can I do in these 6 weeks every day so that when I get out of the cast, I'll be ready to do what I need to do. And then it was like, okay, now I'm out of the cast. I'm in a regular boot for 6 weeks. Like, what can I do in those 6 weeks now that prepare me so when I get out of the boot, I'm ready to go? And like each and every day, like I was doing stuff that, allowed me to get better. And maybe I had a bad day or something, and it was like, all right, well, what can I do to fix that or something like that? And I think just that mindset and having that confidence of having those daily wins can go really a long way, whether you're an athlete or not. You could be working like a regular day job or whatever it is. I think like that, having that mindset's really important.
Love that. You can always do core, like
yeah.
Unless you're absolutely ruined, you can always do core.
That's I had I was just in quarantine for 10 days. And that's what I was doing. I was in my apartment doing what I could.
So guys, we've been on for quite a while, but Lee, there was one question we didn't ask you. Maybe we can finish on it because I think it's super interesting. What do we do once we've got the win?
Oh yeah, celebrating victories. So in 2008, British cyclist Victoria Pendleton won the sprint at the Olympics and went into depression after the Olympics because she'd focused so much on like getting there in the best condition possible and being the best version of herself. She'd forgot to think about what was going to happen after the Olympics. And she forgot to think about, how do I celebrate a victory? So, we've spoken today about celebrating little victories in our training sessions, in our day-to-day lives. And I've spoken a lot about focusing on the process. So you get to the event, you do the process, the victory takes care of itself. So I think this is a great question. What do you do when you win? So I'm going to ask you guys, what do you do when you win? Anyone may go.
I guess like I kind of cherish it with the people that kind of like have always been there for me, whether that's like my family or my girlfriend, or I just take a moment to pray, whatever it is. But really, cherish that moment and celebrate with the people that I know who have maybe made sacrifices with me or have, always supported me, through everything. And not kind of focus on that mindset of like maybe people who didn't believe in me and where I'm like, oh, I proved you wrong, or like celebrating a negative rather than celebrating like the positives.
I love that. What about you, Nikki?
I'm not very good with that. I think I'm very critical even when I win. Oh, I could have done this, done that. Tomorrow I'll do it. I mean, I'll definitely recognize that I did, but I don't think I show it a lot. Maybe I'll send a text to my family, but.
So can I help you with this?
Yes.
Okay. So we can have two distinct things. So we can have analysis, I can't even say the word, an analysis of our performance, and then we can celebrate the result. And they are completely different things. And my recommendation is the first thing you do is you celebrate the result. So, you win something that's meaningful to you. You win anything. One of my mistakes earlier was I would always think, well, okay, I won a district championships, but I should win that. Oh, I won a national championships, but okay, but I want to win a world championships. So it was always looking to the next thing. Now I celebrate every victory. Don't care what it is. I celebrate every victory in life, in sport, celebrate the victories. I like what Matt said, celebrate it with the people that were part of it. There's this kind of misnomer that, you know, oh, he's a self-made person and they've done this, but there's not a single person in the world who's done anything by themselves. There's always somebody that helped you. There was always someone that was there, whatever they support provided. Bring those people in, thank them, celebrate with them. There's a lot of joy in celebrating with people that are part of your journey. And then celebrate yourself. Do something meaningful. Mark the occasion in some way. Buy yourself a gift. Take yourself out for a nice meal with the closest people to you. Do something that really marks the occasion and celebrates it. I won a national championship in UK and US in the same year. And my wife got my jerseys, like put in a cabinet thing and got them put up in our hallway. If you came to my house before then, you'd never know that I was a cyclist. There's no memorabilia on the walls or anything like that. I've never been like that. And that really changed things for me. I was like, yeah, that was really difficult to do that. That was a difficult achievement for me. So to be able to see that and remind myself of it brings me back to that moment as well. So memorialize it, make some, you know, give yourself some kind of reward, really live in that moment, enjoy that moment. Then a few days later, go, right, what did I learn from the experience? What would I change for next time? And separate those things so that you can emotionally enjoy the moment and then get back to that analytical brain of, right, okay, I didn't hit my serve quite as well as I would have wanted there. Let's look at that and let's work on that for the next period. What most athletes do is they win, go straight into analyzing and don't get the moment of actually celebrating the victory. And then what are we doing it for? Like literally, if we don't celebrate the victory, what the hell are we doing this for? It's a waste of our time. We need to be celebrating.
Well, there is an expectation, I feel like, when you're going to the preliminary rounds, like first round, second round, or qualifying. So you don't feel like you deserve to celebrate the win because that was expected of you. So it's like worse if you lose. If you win, you're like, okay, safe. And then you have a match the next day and the next day. So it is hard to be like, if it was an easy match or if it was an easy match and you played terribly, it is hard to just be like, to soak in the win because you have to get ready for the next day.
So again, you can have those small moments. And I hear what you're talking about. You don't want to overplay the early victory because it's like, hey, I'm here for bigger things. I respect that. I do think it's okay, though, to take that moment, even if it's 5 minutes, to go, yeah, I won that match. That was good. Well done, me. Because otherwise, and this is staying, you know, as I talked about earlier, staying in the present. That's staying in the present instead of, I'm looking forwards now. The anxiety's about to start because I'm thinking about the next game before I've even finished this one or just as I finish this one. Give yourself 5 minutes.
Okay.
Give yourself 5 minutes and say, I'm thankful. I'm glad I won this match. I'm going to enjoy this. Try and create a ritual for yourself when you win something, whatever it is, so that you can appreciate your victory. Right, now I'm ready to move on to the next match. Now I'm ready to do that analytical part where I think, right, what do I need to think about for the next match? A bit like I said, you know, with the guys that are going to go to the Olympics and they're going to look around and take a moment to enjoy the emotion of being there. It's the same thing. Enjoy the emotion of winning, then move on to the next thing. But don't miss that step because it's so vital. Because then what happens is you get beaten, you don't win the tournament, you haven't celebrated the victories earlier on, and now they're gone, and you haven't had that moment of joy from the hard work that you've done to get there. Yes, you're expected to win the early rounds. You worked really hard to get there. Where's your recognition for the hard work that made the early rounds easy for you? Where is that? So that's why it's important to have those. Everything should be in some way recognized and you know, enjoyed.
And Lee, I love this because if you do not celebrate in that moment, that moment's gone.
Yeah, it's hard to get it back.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That was really good. I feel like we should have a follow-up on this discussion. It was fantastic.
Anytime, guys.
Listen, thank you for the time this morning. We definitely went over time, but it was really worth it and super interesting. I could do this nearly every day if this was killing me. But Nikki, Matt, I hope that was beneficial. We'll share with the others. And yeah, Lee, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
That was
thank
very
you.
informative and helpful.
Yeah, my pleasure. And if anybody that you send this to has any questions, get them to send them to me. I'll be happy to answer them. And you can find me on Maximize Your Potential Coaching anywhere on the internet. Reach out to me, follow what we do. I'd love to stay connected with you guys.